Hi, my name is Seth Andrews, and this is End Time.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicholas Lamar Suter, and welcome to In Time. It is yet another extraordinary day. I have to tell you, and Lance and I spoke about this, it was quite a coup, and described as such by many news organizations, that Israel was able to detonate, we believe now, as many as 1,000 pagers that were in the hands of Hezbollah. All roughly simultaneously. We learned shortly thereafter that, in fact, they continue to go off. We'll be discussing that in a few minutes. But that by itself was really extraordinarily impressive. Hezbollah decided to change their mode of communication to walkie-talkies. Today, those started exploding, and as Andring pointed out to me when we were having this discussion earlier, the walkie-talkie has two significant disadvantages over the pager in this situation. One, it's bigger, so it can hold more explosive. And two, you're holding it right to your head. So the lesson for today, boys and girls, is Mossad does not play. This is really an extraordinary series of events, and we're very lucky to have Commander McMillan with us, and moderately lucky to have Andring with us as well. I got to watch the jokes, because it's not that I'm worried about a strike. I'm worried about Andring knows where I live, so these are jokes. This is all just being funny. Let's start out with just going straight to Commander McMillan, because we all know that he's the expert here. In fact, probably on almost every subject. And so I don't know why people come to it's not the In Time show, it's the Commander McMillan show. Commander, thank you very much for joining us. And what are your thoughts on what you've been observing?
I think this is going to end up going down in history as one of the greatest intelligence coups, special operations ever. I mean, when you go through all the steps that had to be in place to make this thing work, and then to do it for a second tier with now the walkie-talkies, it's just unbelievable the amount of planning that had to go into this. And it had to be so carefully and precisely controlled to avoid having something go wrong and leak everything. So
before we get into that, I'm going to ask you for a favor. Could you perhaps adjust your headset? One of the things that I've found is doing it with the ears, but do it so the mic is a little closer to your mouth, because we're getting a bit of an echo. So if the mic can get closer to your mouth, that would...
Is that better?
It is a bit. Thank you.
Okay.
Zyner, you had mentioned a couple of things that could go wrong with this. What were your thoughts on what made this so difficult to pull off?
Well, yeah, just look at the timescales involved. From the time they get them and start getting them distributed, you'd think that maybe one person might have dropped it and cracked a screen or something and maybe needed to replace it, opened it up and went, wait a minute, that doesn't look like it should be here. Just that nobody was able to discover this in the amount of time that it took.
Yeah, even a spurious signal accidentally setting one off, that compromises the whole thing. This is just unbelievable.
Or a leak somewhere.
Yeah.
Just somebody saying, hey, did you know they're doing this?
Yeah, and I can just imagine the poor guy at the repair shop opening up the lid and finding PET high explosive in the pager. Just like, I think there's something you should be made aware of, but first I'm calling the bomb squad.
Hey, Abdul, does this look right to you, Abdul? No.
Maybe we'll just carefully put the cover back on and call them and tell them that you're screwed. Come pick your device up.
We don't repair this kind of device, but thank you for. Well, and
I think this is out of warranty.
Yeah, it's been
not
tampered with since. Yeah.
It's like, not only is this like an amazing feat that they were able to pull off with so many areas of vulnerability to cause the whole thing to come collapsing down. Generally, my understanding, I'm not an intelligence expert, but generally my understanding is when you're planning operations, especially offensive style operations like this, you want as few moving parts, as few variables in it as possible. And every time you add another variable, even a small one, it just exponentially raises the uncertainty of the success of any operation that you do. And so we've not only been able to witness what I think is a pretty significant pull off of an event, but the story, I mean, the headline, Israel moves to explosive climax, and
it goes even further though, because particularly with this new second step with the walkie-talkie starting to detonate, it means that Hezbollah has no option but to get rid of all electronic communications from their system until they sorted this nightmare out. So everything is moving at the speed of some guy on a moped, basically.
So yeah, about that, they have. You're not going to believe me. You're really not going to believe me. They have decided to, I guess, go off the grid, or I don't know what they're doing, but they are using backup solar-powered devices, or solar-powered some kind of generator, it looks like. One of those just exploded about an hour ago.
Layers upon layers upon layers. This is the birthday cake that keeps on giving.
Oh dear Lord!
Now,
so for those of
the thing that's going to be truly, the thing that's going to be like truly, I don't even know what word I want to use there. I guess epic about it would be as if that the solar panel just literally overpowered and the charge controller failed. It was a complete accident.
No, we have reports of plural since that report. So we now have, as of today, radios and solar devices. I don't know what that means, detonating across Lebanon. So for those of you just joining us, or those of you who've been living under a rock for the last 48 hours, let's discuss roughly the timeline and what we know about what's happened. Fully aware that their cell phones can be tracked, Hezbollah decided in March that they were going to get pagers and use pagers instead to communicate, since the pagers only receive and do not send. They ordered the pagers from, oh dear Lord, I've forgotten the name once again, Gold. It appears they ordered it from a company, Gold something, I'm sorry, I've forgotten the other name. But that company, as it turns out, had licensed the manufacture of those pagers to a third-party company. That third-party company is in Bombay. The address is a residence in Bombay. It turns out 12 businesses and one individual are registered to that address, including the manufacturer of these pagers. The manufacturer did in fact have a license to put the brand name of this brand on it, and it appears that wherever they were manufactured, some shadow business was the one manufacturing them and had licensed the name to put onto the pagers, and then literally manufactured this. So it's not even just slipping C4 into it. It appears as if
Well, you had
the
to go
entire,
even beyond that. You needed a marketing department to convince Hezbollah that this was the model to buy.
which they had.
Yeah,
They had,
it's mind-boggling how deep this thing is. It really is an incredibly complicated and multi-layered thing. And then when you add that onto it, that it's not just the pagers, it's not just the walkie-talkies, it's now, into cell phone or solar battery somethings or other. And, who knows at what point it's going to stop. I mean, the folks at Hezbollah at this point are, do we start using the mail or is that too dangerous?
I'm saying carrier pigeon, but I can at this point just imagine that you don't know if the carrier pigeon's carrying anymore.
Yeah, I'm totally investing in my
pigeon.
neighbors. Yeah, I'm totally investing in my neighbor's carrier pigeon coop.
Yeah, and then we got this at, I think it was 12:47 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Israel issued a warning that it was going to attack Hezbollah. I shit you not, they did that today. 12:47. They issued a warning that they're going to attack Hezbollah. This is more than 24 hours, nearly 48 hours into the attack. They're like, oh, by the way, just wanted to let you know you're going to have a difficult couple of days.
We forgot in the Christmas rush.
They did also notify the U.S. 24 hours in advance that they were going to engage in military actions against Hezbollah. They did not tell the U.S. what the nature of that attack was going to be, but the U.S. was forewarned. So, I mean, at this point, there's no real, and I don't think there ever was a question that this was Israel, but it's, Israel has also made it clear that the Gaza Strip, or the operation in Gaza, is not going to be their priority anymore, and they are reprioritizing to the north in Hezbollah, and seem to be signaling to me that they are going to invade Lebanon. Is that your impression, that that's what they're signaling? And what do you think is the likelihood that they're going to do that?
That's a real hard one to guess at. Sorry, my wife just
Well, the dog has several opinions.
Yes.
Now, she may voice as many opinions as she likes. However, Lance, I'm not giving her $50 too. It just goes for one of you. It's per window.
So, if you're going to invade, this is the absolute perfect time to do something like that, because the command structure of your primary opponent is going to be in complete and utter disarray. So trying to put together any sort of cohesive resistance to an Israeli move, near impossible. And you wonder if that was the plan all along, if this was, they were going to go in, so they needed to send or set the conditions in place to make it as easily feasible as possible, and this would be a great way to do it.
So, as Andrew, you had said something about that as well, that with the communications down, and that kind of infrastructure, what was that you had said earlier about that?
Oh, it's just, yeah, when you can't trust your own, communications, that it completely isolates all of your people. You can lose complete command and control. So, now you can't talk to people, and they're thrown back on own small group tactics, and that's all that they can do. And then you're also not going to know that anything's happening over there when you're over here, because nobody has any communications again. So, forcing people, blowing up as much of the communications as you can, and in the process, sowing a hell of a lot of suspicion about any electronic devices that may be near you. I can certainly say I'd be a little leery of stepping near anything electronic at this point. There's nothing that they can do. You could waltz right through a lot of this stuff, because how are they going to get reserves where it needs to go? How are they going to respond to anything? And they don't know what's happening until the bombs are actually falling on you. So yeah, it would be a great time to do it.
I can only think right now, I mean, like the scariest thing that could possibly happen if you're in Lebanon right now, and this is half joke, half serious, the scariest thing that could happen is the phone rings. I mean, if I was anywhere and my phone rang, I'd be like, honey, could you answer the phone? Sorry, I don't know what. Oh,
let
dear
it go to
Lord.
voicemail. Just let it go to voicemail.
Take a message for me.
Yeah. Oh, dear Lord. So, Hezbollah has admitted that this has been near catastrophic to their infrastructure. I believe, Commander, you would concur that that's likely an accurate assessment?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And
Hezbollah. Oh, yes.
no, I just because the main people that are going to be using these kind of devices are, command structure, middle management type people, the guys who would be the ones who coordinate any kind of effort.
And hospital staff.
Yeah, I mean, you don't
Yeah.
pass this sort of equipment out to the guy who's Bubba manning a roadblock with his, ancient AK-47 or whatever. This is for
No, he's got the walkie-talkie.
probably doesn't even have that. That's probably just the supervisor at that station. That's my point. This is so, when you think about the ramifications, the precision that this operation is going forward at in terms of taking out anybody who is in a command position at multiple levels. It's just amazing how effective something like this could be.
Well, and it seems to me then, too, that basically, okay, so this requires immense patience. You put together this entire operation that could be blown at any time, and then you have to wait for the right time to do it.
Yep.
But having said that, time is not your friend, because the longer that goes on, the more likelihood that what, as Andring said, is going to happen. Someone's going to drop one of these and say, hey, why is there high explosive in my walkie-talkie? That's not that I didn't see that in the owner's manual. So, given that, they seem to have threaded the needle like 10 times in a row to pull this off.
Yeah.
It's utterly insane. Now, Hezbollah is, if I recall, the largest military organization in the area, excluding the Israeli military, depending on how you define the reservists and whatnot. Is that accurate?
If you're talking Lebanon, yeah. I think, if you extended that into Syria or you extended it into Egypt, they have much larger military organizations. But when we're talking a irregular force, so whether it's Hamas or Black September or Hezbollah, Hezbollah is probably the largest and best organized of all.
All right. So at this point, it seems like Lebanon, I mean, does Lebanon have any defenses of its own outside of irregulars like Hezbollah?
Not really. Lebanon has an official national military, but it's probably smaller and less well equipped than the Hezbollah militias are.
And frankly, if I were in that military, I'd be like, I'm retiring. Because I mean, there is a possibility. I don't think Mossad would go far enough to also hit them, but at this point, I don't think I wouldn't bet my life.
Well, particularly because the official military of Lebanon is largely Christian Phalange forces. Then you also have the Druze militia, who are an interesting group because they are a very insular Muslim group, but they are or not aligned with Hezbollah or Hamas or any of those organizations. It's a strange analogy, but bear with me. It would be like saying the Amish. They only marry inside their own little sect, that kind of thing. And they actually have to a large extent, worked cooperatively with the Israelis. They don't like the Hezbollah.
Let me, and somebody mentioned this in the live chat. I did want to play this. So we're going to see a clip of one of these detonating. It's the clip that most people have seen. Now you're going to see a number of people on screen. The one that you want to be paying attention to is the one in the ball cap with a bag and a light shirt. So let's see if we can get this played here. So and there's a couple more clips, but I think that's the you want. And I wonder if I can actually. One more time and see if I can. That's what one of these things looks like when they go off. All right, so
And I think it's worth noting that it takes time for word to get out of what's going on. You said there was something about a funeral where people were still, the pagers went off and what? And then boom, it went off in the guy's hand, even though they were at the funeral for a guy who'd been killed by one of these devices. It takes time for that kind of information to disseminate through your rank structure to stop using the damn pagers.
Well, which brings me to the other thing that happened today. So there was a funeral for, I believe it was 4 members of Hamas who had been killed. And guess what someone decided to wear to the funeral? Their pager.
A sharp-looking... Oh, no. No way.
Yes, they wore their pager to the funeral. It went off during the funeral. The pagers are still going off. So we had said that they'd all gone off simultaneously. There was a huge number that started simultaneously, but it appears there's a delayed response to some of these. And, that does beg the question. It's sort of like if you can't use communications, how are you going to warn people not to use the communications? I don't, oh, dear Lord. So we also know, and we talk about this a lot with you, Commander, about the politics in Israel and the fact that Netanyahu really isn't even, in our view, a true believer. He's not really a, God has imparted this land upon us kind of guy. What he is a authoritarian strongman who is trying to stay out of prison and who has been facing indictment on a number of very serious charges and cannot be indicted so long as he is prime minister. His party is a right-wing party that has the plurality but not the majority to keep him in power, and got that majority only by using or getting the cooperation of a very small extreme right-wing group that has threatened to withdraw their support if he stops the war. So in order to keep himself out of jail, Netanyahu has to stay in power, which means he needs to continue and even exacerbate this war. Is that a fair summary of your view and what we've discussed so far?
Oh, yeah. And if you don't think a little trick like this will continue to maintain the enmity of Hezbollah and Hamas against Israel for quite some time, I don't think you understand what's really going on here. So, yeah, it's perpetuating that cycle of violence so that as long as that's going, he gets to stay in charge.
So his defense minister seemed to me to be the least insane of any member of his cabinet, and had in fact attempted to minimize civilian casualties, which strikes me as almost a no-no in the Netanyahu administration. He is now there is uncited intelligence sources that say Netanyahu intends to replace him with a new defense minister, from that very far right party, which means that he will be even less warm and cuddly than the previous one. Does that signal anything to you, and what do you think we can expect as a result of that?
It doesn't signal anything new or different. I don't think it's a particular change of policy. It's reinforcing more of the same. It does perhaps suggest that we may see some of those tactics extended internally against opposition groups within Israel. If you decide that, they also pose a threat, well, all you have to do is find some way to say, oh, they're dangerous. We need to get them too. Hey, would you like a pager?
I keep asking Titan for a pager, and he does not take the bait. I swear, I put it right in front of him, and he just looks at me, mildly amused that I ever thought he was stupid enough to take it, and also really annoyed that I'm wasting his time. I keep doing it, mostly because I like wasting his time. So Iran has been asked, and I gotta say, this is sort of like don't poke the bear, in my view. It's like, I don't think you should be asking Iran any questions right now, but Iran was in fact asked. Somebody pointed out that not that long ago, I think about 2 months ago, there was, or last, they're all flowing together, but there were multiple assassinations on Iranians. No, not multiple. I think it was just one assassination on Iranian soil by the Israelis. Iran had promised retaliation, and as of yet, they have not retaliated. The Ayatollah, when asked if they intended to retaliate, the Ayatollah said, quote, "God allows retreat only when it's tactical." Which, I'm not in the military, but that strikes me as a bad sign. So, do you think Iran may try to take advantage of this, and if so, how?
I think they definitely will. They need to, because Hezbollah is one of their primary agents or agencies, if you will, in the Middle East. And for the Hezbollah command structure to be decimated like this, to maintain any credibility, they need to strike back. Because if you don't have that strong reaction from the Iranian-backed whoever it is, or show that Iran is doing something to help their proxies, then that whole house of cards begins to cave in.
All right, so, yeah. And I see that Brooks has joined us in the center room, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring him into the show. And Brooks, you are now in the show. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here. It's I wanted to kind of I was yelling in the comments and chat, and I figured I might as well yell in person. So that there's a lot of interesting things with this that I think. There's a couple of big notes. The first for me is that this is one, clearly simply a terrorist attack. Like there's no way to talk about it in any other way. This is traditional, good old fashioned terrorism, the kind that we used to just have in movies, or evil villains and as a thing. So when we talk about like the military being involved, or Hezbollah, or how this went down, or where it went down, there's a lot of very specific things around the timing of this that are really wild. Israel and Hezbollah have been trying to find diplomatic solutions, they claim, for some time, and they've been back and forth and everyone being shitty to each other. And it just so happens that Israel has, by doing this, basically confirmed that there's no potential. This is 2,000 plus people injured, a dozen dead, more people like across the entire country. And this, like the city alone, or the area, but the country or the area, there's no way people aren't absolutely terrified to have a digital device of any sort. Like, that's just like, you're talking about average civilians, not military. If you look at the videos, yes, these things were these were detonated at the same time. They were detonated across the entire country, thousands of them at the same time. And people were driving cars, like actively going like 50, 60 miles. They don't give a shit about civilian deaths, is I think the number one thing to take from this. That this wasn't we figured out because we're such a good intelligence org that this guy is wearing the pager now detonate it. This is instead, oh fuck, we've got to detonate them. The big reason why, I think, would be great to know. I think the timing is weird. It would be the kind of, I would say this would be the kind of thing you'd hold off if you could until you're in a war, which seems imminent, but it's just a weird terrorist act. The thing that I think is most interesting is tracing the pagers and the brilliance of what Mossad did. I don't think it's actually as clever as people think. These pagers and technology in Taiwan, we'll just take Taiwan, but China is the same thing. There's no such thing as a company that makes something. It sounds weird. The company that makes technology, all of them, all white label. They all white label their stuff, or they also allow their brand to be taken by other companies. And I've already seen early reports that Apollo Gold had a partner in the Middle East, just a random partner who was manufacturing under their setup and their name, which is that's the company that apparently most of these pagers, or all these pagers, were. And there's an odd interaction between, hey, we sold these guys, there were odd payments. Like, they're talking about this openly because Taiwan doesn't want to get involved in this at all. Taiwan, they don't want their supply chain getting fucked. They don't want people not trusting what's coming from their country. And so they're pulling out all the stops to say these were not manufactured in Taiwan. There's a Times article I'll happily send over on this that sort of goes, it looks like these were not manufactured in Taiwan. The company's outright denying it. The government's backing them up, saying that it was a company instead in Hungary that licensed the ability to manufacture their own. But Hungary is saying that they weren't made here, but the bank accounts were definitely there. And it's more or less seems to be the case from what everything's pointing out, that Hezbollah had a shell company license this, built these, and then sent them off as if they were a sales thing and had some sort of setup that way. This setup is kind of brilliant in its simplicity. It's not nearly as complex as, oh, they intercepted a shipment on the way. There's like all these like Tom Clancy spy ideas that are coming out. It's much more simple. They built all the pagers with the explosives in them and slapped on legally with the license and everything, and sold them as if they were the company. It's kind of an incredible little story in that side. But again, these were 2,000 plus 3,000, I think, is the new count, plus other things, other radio, other shit. There's a lot of these little, it seems, companies manufacturing basically bombs for everyone throughout Lebanon. It's not just Hezbollah. I think for me, I'm just horrified by the callousness of what this is. I think overall, because this is straight up targeting civilians.
Yes, please, Commander.
I agree and disagree.
Yeah, feel free.
In some ways, I think it's a legitimate military target because these are going to the command structure of the hostile organization you want to deal with. And they are making the callous calculation, I should say, that collateral damage done by these devices going off is irrelevant. You know, how does that differ from strategic bombing of Dresden in World War II? Well, we started a firestorm that killed 100,000 people. You know, but we did take out the rail yard, so we're good there. Yeah, I agree with you. I think calling it a terrorist attack is a stretch, but I don't entirely disagree that it fits into that category. But it is.
I mean, it was detonated. The videos we've all seen, they're in marketplaces. One's at a food stand. The horror that's literally created by this is the intention very much of this. It's an odd thing because the next step is going to be they just simply get a new communication system, and they'll be able to do that because they just find and realize, oh fuck, we can't work with random companies. We need to go all the way up the supply chain and actually be part of it. They'll find someone who's willing to do that. And that will just sort of cure this before a big war. But even with that, you're talking about 2,000. We don't even know, and they don't know if people were wearing their pager, if they gave it to their kids. Like, it feels like a horrifying.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying if they want to play that legal game, they have an argument to be made. I think it's a disingenuous, vile one, but
and an argument that
I mean, they don't care about law. Let's be very
clear. Yeah,
they don't give a shit about any of that. But it's all of it just sort of there's one of the things I think maybe the thing I'm most trying to push back on is there is this idea that Mossad is like this brilliant intelligence organization, that they're like that any of these orgs are like perfect. It's a lot of like how people view Putin as this mastermind, and so anything that happens, Putin was addressing that, or he's playing 5D chess, and it sort of feeds into that. And in this case, there's no reason to think like it's clever and like a large scale sort of ideal thing, but everything about this could simply have gone completely wrong. Like this could be early, someone could have discovered it, they detonated it. It could be that there are literally thousands more that are waiting to be detonated because they have the tech to know where these things were. Like we know Pegasus exists. Whether or not it caused this or not, they have the ability to know where these pagers were at any given time, where these cell phones were. So there's kind of there's a lot more happening here that I think is a lot more haphazard and kind of terrifying to me. And I think to just people in general that we're not seeing the end of this, and I don't care for that.
No, I don't at all. I agree entirely.
Well, it's also entirely possible that, just as Brooks pointed out, I mean, it looks like this was the plan all along, but it could be that they were waiting for another month and a half, and then Mossad detected that somebody had, in fact, discovered the plan, or there was a leak. It was about to get out, and they either trigger it now or risk losing the possibility of ever using it. So they did it now, and it looks spectacular, but in fact was, thank you, Brooks, but in fact was just completely messed up. The UN has condemned this yet again, so yay. At what point is the US going to let me rephrase this because I don't even think I can.
I could see that hole getting deeper and was hoping
I was just playing that in my head. I was like, okay, does the U.S. care? I'm not going to say any of the candidates care because we already know the answer on one of them. So let's just talk about Kamala. Does Biden care? Does Kamala care? And if so, at what point does that caring translate into any kind of action, even if it's nothing more than just saying we're not going to arm you anymore? And I'd like to start with Commander and then hear from Brooks.
I think they need to, or will before they make some sort of statement, and I can't imagine it would be a pro statement, so I think before they make a negative comment or statement about the attacks, they're going to want to evaluate and consider all the ramifications and tailor the comments so that it has the least negative impact to the campaign at the moment. That I think is what's going on. So I would expect some sort of comment to come out within the next 3 to 4 days, maybe.
And no change in policy whatsoever, or maybe
Not
a
really.
token. Okay.
Yeah, the token finger wave kind of thing.
Or we're gonna send one fewer missile in the next shipment.
Yes.
Brooks, any thoughts?
For me, it's kind of simple, actually. Israel's doing everything they can to ensure that prior to the election, they put what I think Harris is going to win the election. I think most people are at this point where they kind of see the writing on the wall unless some crazy shit happens. If Harris wins, there's every chance that actually we'll see pressure on Israel to desist, to stop doing stuff. So Israel's job before the election is to basically do everything they can while they have an ideologue in the presidency, which they do, to make sure that when Kamala gets in there, she can't abandon Israel. If they do everything they can to get Lebanon to actually do a full-scale attack, or Iran to do a full-scale attack and force us to commit to one side or the other prior to her coming in, she can't pull back from it. And that's their gambit. Their gambit is basically to make it politically untenable to not support them.
Yeah. Totally.
All right. So let's sort of role play here. You are... Well, Hezbollah has said that they're going to counterattack right away. I don't see any way in which anything like that is remotely possible. In fact, they can barely prepare a defense in case Lebanon is invaded. So I was going to ask, if you're Hezbollah, what do you do next? And I think the answer is lick your wounds and try as best you can to recover. But I think that's going to take a little while. So if you're Israel, what do you do next? Do you invade? Do you do something else that's short of invading? And are they really going to give up on Gaza, or are they just going to keep the pressure up on that? What? And this is all. Oh well. Okay. Good. Yeah.
No,
so does anybody have any wild speculation or? Yeah.
Yeah. A number of the folks in the chat stream keep saying, "Why now? Why were these attacks conducted now?"
Yep.
And that's the missing part of the puzzle from my perspective. There's nothing that would compel you to go ahead with this, even if there was a chance of it, somebody dropping the thing and uncovering it. It'd still be, like 9/11 or Pearl Harbor. Everybody would just discount it and say, "Oh, it's just one device," kind of thing. It's the way bureaucracies operate. Something was the compelling factor behind starting the attacks as a thing to do right now, and to make it not just one or two specifically targeted individuals, but the whole broad range spectrum that everybody's got one of these hits. We'll move today. And until we have the answer why or what that is and why that occurred when it did, I don't think we really have a good way to conjecture.
I hate to say it, I agree entirely. I don't believe we'll ever know, because I think the only answers that make any sense are things we'll never be able to be privy to. It's someone learned about this, or one pager broke open because some kid was playing with it, or someone dropped it and you went, "Oh fuck, what's this?" And Israel found out and had to blow them all. And we'll never know if that's the case. We'll also never know if, Lebanon's about to get their guys together to launch a full-scale attack. Now press the button. We'll never know about that either, because we're never going to be told about, like, anything that caused this to be the thing is just going to be the thing. We'll find some narrative that's wrapped for us, but the real reason is never going to be shown. I don't think.
It will be buried under multiple layers.
Yeah, or it's impossible for anyone to really get at, because it's the other reasonable answer is that someone's a shithead, which is like the reason most military things happen when they
that's
do
the average, or that's the median. So
it's for me.
This morning.
I think Lebanon. I think they have responses that they can do, and I think it's going to be very similar to what Iran did, where it's symbolic attacks rather than direct, real attacks. Iran doing what they did and blowing up an unmanned airbase that they gave warnings of, they did a bunch of shit to have a symbolic, almost Pyrrhic victory. And I think Lebanon, given the proximity they have to northern Israel, given how many people they've already chased out of northern Israel, I think we'll see attacks on smaller villages, small settlements, things like that. But it's not going to be anything full scale. They'll do a tit for tat response, and then ultimately, I think that there will be another move by somebody that will escalate this prior to the U.S. election. I think that's going to be the big next move.
Yeah.
And we have a $5 super chat. Thank you very much for that from Papa Dutch. Quote, Helter Skelter. Yeah. I assume that's referencing to lunatics in charge, but unless I missed something, which is entirely possible as well. Commander, could you give us a brief rundown of Israel is tying this to a war they already had in Gaza. Now, Gaza is in a completely different area, and it was against a different group. So could you tell us how the war in Gaza started and where it was sort of before this happened?
Don't call it a war.
How far back do you want to go?
Well, briefly,
October 7th.
October 7th.
If we go for the most recent one, it was the terror attacks in October 7th. But that whole thing goes even farther back than that. That's just the most proximate big deal one. I think the key thing to understand is that Hamas and Hezbollah are inexorably linked. My recollection is that something like 75% of all of Hamas's funding comes via Hezbollah from Iran. So Hezbollah is basically acting as the banker for Iran at these conflicts. So if you have the war going on in the Gaza thing in retaliation for the October raid, and then you have Iran pressuring Hezbollah to do something to take the pressure off of them and express Iran's outrage at what's happening in Gaza, then Hezbollah, which we know have been doing this, launching rocket and artillery and mortar strikes across the border. And it all just kind of compounds one upon the other. At some point, somebody in the command structure said, enough of this crap, do something. There you have it.
So Hezbollah directly had nothing to do with the original. And when I say war, that's just sort of in order to reference it.
It's important. It's an important distinction though, because calling it war presumes a lot of things. It's much more similar if we use war here to war on drugs, which is a stupid word for the such thing. The reality is Israel, a population of 9 million, a population of legitimate 9 million, took 6 million extra. They're a population of around 15 million, actually, all in Israel. Took around 6 million, shoved them into 2 giant open-air camps that they run and control as a state and allow a state inside of those. And then, lo and behold, started taking land further and further and encroaching further and further into those open-air prisons until those people responded. And that's, I don't understand any other way.
Oh, that's a great summary of the reality on the ground.
Because they are citizens of Israel by any stretch of the imagination.
All right.
When they elected Hamas, and everyone talks about this election of Hamas, it was allowed by Israel. Israel didn't allow elections before that. They allowed that election. It turned out poorly, and so it's a really weird thing to talk about a country allowing another country to have elections. It's not how it works. Countries have, unless they don't have control over their own state. Like, they aren't a country at that point. Like, when we allowed Iraq to have their first election. To call them their own country free of us is silly at that point. After we withdrew and they have elections, they're free. They're their own state. There's some very important words around this. When we talk about war, it's similar to if we were to talk about Puerto Rico here in the United States and start talking about how we're going to start killing, how we're invading or bombing Puerto Rico. We wouldn't call it the war with Puerto Rico. That's us. That's our state. We just don't call it that because of stupid legal reasons.
All right, Xandring, if you could check your Discord, I would appreciate that. What can we expect? Are we looking at basically more random detonations and some token reprisals? Is that what we're going to be looking at for the next 24, 48 hours? And then Brooks, in your view, a
Hours?
significant escalation?
Hours?
Did I say
Weeks?
hours? I meant days.
Weeks? Months? Years?
It's tough to say.
Yeah, I mean, this madness has gone on for, since 47, 48. And I don't see it really stopping anytime soon. There are too many parties within the system on both sides who want it to continue to maintain their position where they are.
All right. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to thank you, Xander. I think what we're going to do is we're going to wrap it up. So any final thoughts before we go? And I'll start with you, Brooks.
I think we just need to, in general, mourn and be sad for this, because no matter what, this is horrifying and it's just going to continue to be so. But ultimately, we just need to start pushing for finding a way towards a real ceasefire and towards actual diplomatic solutions to these things. I don't foresee that being a realistic solution. There's too much power. The hegemony of the area is either Saudi Arabia or Iran under the thumb of the United States, and Israel is somehow at the crux of it, and it's just going to end so poorly for everybody. It's terrifying to me. This is like watching a train wreck in exceptionally slow motion. Like someone filmed a train wreck at like 300,000 frames a second, and we're just starting.
Yeah.
Like it's coming, and it's like, yep, there it goes. It's still going. It's still moving forward. What are we going to do? I guess.
Great analogy.
Xander, any final thoughts?
My final thoughts is I really want to get be able to see some of the intelligence that Israel had behind a lot of this stuff, because you could go from ostensibly being a fairly surgical strike, depending upon the intelligence they have, to being hey, let's just throw a bunch of electronics out there and hope for the best, or with bombs on them and hope for the best. I mean, so it could be like, this is a questionable tactic, all the way down to, this is absolutely horrific, and how could we allow somebody to do this? And I fear that we aren't ever really going to be able to know the answer to that. I don't think they're going to share the kinds of intelligence that would need to be shared to get a good picture of how this all exactly shut down, what the decisions were made. And because of that, we're going to have people across the entire spectrum are going to pick the side that they're already in favor of, and they're going to, support them and say, no, this was good or this was bad, based upon, their already preformed notions of who they supported.
I'll point out that on the first day, I think it was 11 deaths, 2 of them children. So that's a pretty small sample size, but nonetheless, that is, even if you assume that the others were all legitimate targets, which is one heck of an assumption, that's still a pretty high civilian casualty count.
Let's be fair. I mean, to be fair to Israel, that has been their tactic. So having them kill children is just part and parcel of it, and they need to keep their ratio up in every attack they make.
You are demonetized until Jesus returns. Wait. Why would Jesus be involved in this discussion?
Chinbet is asking what your home address is. You have a package they're mailing you.
Oh, dear Lord. And we did get a super chat from Blonde Bombsheller. Your name here, smiley face heart, for $10. Thank you so much for the super chat. We really do appreciate it. And also, we've got a Discord. We're following this literally as it's happening on our Discord. Anyone who knows the show knows that our breaking news is always on top of this, and we're going to stay on top of it. And if anything new and exciting breaks, we'll certainly be there for that. So we appreciate all of you. And since we get demonetized basically nearly every show, YouTube is a much bigger fan of unboxing videos, I've noticed, than videos that are talking about riots, murder, and various forms of mayhem and war. But we try to bring you as close to an honest view as possible. So
I do want to say also, and I've been seeing it a lot. There's a comment in the chat, and I'm not saying it's an actual threat. I think it's a funny joke. Stay away from pagers, Brooks, which is a great line. But the reality is that's actually a thing. Like, as of now, that's actually a thing that Israel has shown, that opposition to it can be met with exceptional terrorism in a way that is, they don't give a shit. They just don't give a shit. And so this is why terror as a tactic of the state is especially heinous and needs to be dealt with in very particular ways and condemned in particular ways. And that we continue to support this as a state, I think is exceptionally problematic.
Yeah.
Commander, any last words? And I don't mean that because I just sent you a pager. I mean that in terms of like for the show.
Yeah, I know.
And don't open the pager on air. If you could just wait on that until we're probably already demonetized.
You don't want the video to get demonetized. I got it.
Yeah, yeah.
I hadn't really thought of it as a terrorist attack until Brooks mentioned it. And the more I think about it, I think that is a very apt description of the situation. Really is. Okay.
Brooks has this way of saying things that the first time you hear it, you're sitting there going like, well, I never thought of that. That's kind of silly. And then the more you think about it, like, why isn't everybody realizing that that's the way it is? So I'm very glad you joined us, Brooks. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to the mods and to everyone who has super chatted or become a member. Again, please feel free to join us on the Discord. And we look forward to seeing you next time, hopefully under better circumstances. Have a good day, all. Good night.